Hello, Misty.
Hello.
How
How
are
are you, my
you?
friend?
I'm
I'm
very
doing very
well,
well.
thank you. I'm very well. Things are, yeah, well, they're crazy over here. How are they doing over there?
Oh, you
You've got
know,
Joe Biden now. All your problems were solved.
we defeated fascism,
You
Gordon. It's
defeated
all
fascism at the
over.
ballot box, and all your problems are solved.
I know. We like cut child poverty in half and everything's great. I mean, everything's perfect. The United States is in tip-top shape.
It's you're obviously being facetious, as am I. How
Yes.
really is it? How, obviously we get lots of reports in the media over here of what it's like in America right now, and we get lots of what the politicians say over here. That's like the politicians are saying this and the politicians are saying that, but we don't get what's it like on the ground in America. What is it like? What are the people over there? What, are they happy? Are they sad? Are they
Oh,
living in tents?
Yeah, lots of people are living in tents. Our homelessness crisis is out of control, has been for quite some time. Nobody's doing anything about it. People are miserable. People are suffering. People are losing their jobs. People are unable to provide food for their families. And that's all escalating. It's all getting worse day by day. And I'm sure that from what you all hear in the media, everything's fine
Yeah.
because mainstream media is garbage. But no, it's really actually quite terrible. Joe Biden is doing absolutely nothing to make anything better for anybody except his wealthy donors. But that's what he promised. Nothing would fundamentally change. So he did keep one
It's
promise.
I saw somebody, I think it was a Carl Kalinske video yesterday. I saw the title of it, and it was something like Biden kept 8% of his promises. And I'm like, wow, that high. Because from what I can gather, the only campaign promise that he kept was, as you say, nothing will fundamentally change. And that's the promise that he made, obviously, the big donors.
Mm-hmm.
And everything else that he campaigned on, yeah, it's all gone to the wind. I mean, what else did he say that he was going to do, Misty?
Nothing. Nothing. He's done nothing. I mean, he campaigned on raising the minimum wage. He hasn't done that. In fact, he shot it down multiple times. He campaigned. I mean, they claim now that they have cut child. I have kids in the background. I'm sorry.
It's okay, mate. Don't worry. I've got one in the background as well.
Okay. No, I have furry kids, but then I also have actual kids who are screeching.
Okay. All right.
But yeah, we don't get minimum wage. It's the year 2021 in the United States of America in the middle of a global pandemic, and we don't have health care, can't even get a floor vote. He hasn't nothing. He's done nothing. He has done absolutely nothing that he claimed he was going to do. In fact, he promised $2,000 checks if the voters in Georgia elected Democrats in the special election, and we got $1,400 instead. So we didn't even get our full $2,000 check.
And even then, you had to wait until he bombed Syria first before you
Yes,
got those.
which I think took about 32 days into his presidency before, but he did save us 16 cents on 4th of July barbecue foods. So there's that.
What's the minimum wage in America? Over here, it's almost £10 now, which I think is about like, I know it's worth about $1.25 now. Then no, I think it's about £10, £9 something. It is over here. What is it over there? Is it
I want to say,
7.25?
I think it's 7.25 still. I know that there would.
So it's about £5 an hour.
Yeah, it's a
Okay.
joke. It's a joke.
Now, you've got over here, we've got people walking out of our jobs left, right, and centre. They've just had enough and down in tools, and it's happening over there as well, isn't it? They're calling it the Great Resignation.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think it's got something to do with the fact that nobody's going to work for £5 an hour when a coffee at Starbucks costs £5.50?
Absolutely. Of course. I mean, why would anybody want to work, some terrible go nowhere job for pennies? I mean, you can't, there's not a state in the United States of America where you can work full time and afford a 2-bedroom apartment. That's ridiculous. Minimum wage, you should be able to at least be able to provide a minimum living for yourself. You should be able to have food and housing and all of those good things. And you can't do that in the United States. And it's been that way for a long time. I mean, we're still talking about $15 an hour. And frankly, that's an insult. $15 is an insult. $15 was the conversation 10 years ago. I mean, it should be at least 25. I would say closer to 30 at this point, but we're still having a conversation about $15 an hour. And it's a completely ridiculous, it's an insult to workers. It really is. Workers drive this country. They drive every country. And you should be compensated. We deserve so much better.
Are you guys getting anything at all from this Biden administration? Because from when I look from over here, I mean, I did a video, I think a couple of weeks ago, where I was just analyzing what the foreign policy was like. And there's no difference between this administration and the Trump administration. The only difference is this president's still got his Twitter account. That's really it.
But he doesn't actually tweet. I mean, an intern tweets. But I've been saying recently, I've been saying that the only difference between Biden and Trump is their rhetoric and the bless you.
Excuse me, I was trying to mute. I was trying to mute at the same time that it just can't do. Sorry, carry on.
No, you're fine. But the only difference between the two of them is, the rhetoric that they use and the population that they pander to. The demographic that they pander to. That's really it. This has been the case for a very long time in this country. It doesn't matter who the president is. They're still working the same agenda. They're working toward the same ends. It's different packaging. It's a different cover on the same book. So yeah, we have less mean tweets, but fundamentally, there is no difference. There are more kids in cages. The foreign policy has stayed exactly the same, arguably worse than under Trump. Nothing has changed. Things are just getting worse. So
it doesn't matter what you vote for, then you're just going to get a neoliberal government, no matter, or neoconservative government. I did a video the other day. I did a podcast with Dr. Piers Robinson. I know you talked to on your Facts of the Ground podcast yesterday as well. An amazing, intelligent guy, and we were talking about how factions within the political spectrum are getting mislabeled. In order to try and divide people and keep people divided and fighting amongst themselves, whilst they bring in a new area of authoritarianism almost. And one of the things that I'm noticing a lot when I watch sort of mainstream outlets in America, how the powers that be are trying to mislabel factions within your politics and try and get it so nobody knows what left or right means anymore. It's a meaningless term. We're calling, I did a video where they're calling Joe Biden and the Democrats the radical left. And I said the only way that radical is that the radical left is that they're center right. If you look policy by policy for what Joe Biden is, and he's meant to be your left of center centrist in America, his policies are almost exactly the same as Margaret Thatcher's. And she's an authoritarian conservative, and if that's your left-wing party in America, what the media are calling a left-wing party is, then you haven't got a left. No. What are your thoughts on it, Misty?
We don't have a left. It's really depressing. And I watched your interview with Piers, and it was awesome. We've talked to him a couple of times on Facts, and you're right. He is just incredibly thoughtful. And I like being that I'm very interested in propaganda and like media spin and all of that stuff. Talking to him is fascinating. But yeah, when he was saying that the left right, it doesn't exist. That left right, it's a division. They're using it against us to keep us divided and fighting amongst ourselves. And then you're right. They're mislabeling people. Like they're calling people like myself Nazis because I'm willing to talk to people who are to my right. And that's ridiculous. You're using words like Nazi and fascist, like it's, it makes no sense. And so you're devaluing those terms, and language should matter. But they're devaluing these terms. It's like completely stripping away the actual meaning behind them. And so when actual fascists are running around, it's a lot more difficult for people to recognize what's happening. And when you're calling people like Nancy Pelosi progressive and left, and that Biden's going to be FDR and all of this other stuff, it's just a really easy and simple way to confuse people and to confuse the conversation. And they're very effective at it. I mean, this is part of their propaganda game. They're very effective at doing this, unfortunately. And they've really done a great job of keeping everybody focused on the wrong things and the wrong people.
One of the problems I've had, one of the things that really irks me about members of parliament that we've elected over here are people who have been elected, in a progressive manner, and then have got in and just basically fallen in line. And I see that with American politics, with the squad, and just how effective, or rather how ineffective, have they have they been since, because it's only been in the last like last couple of election cycles that they've started coming in. I think there's like 10 or 11 of them now. You know, when you've got a group of people like that, 10 people, they can be really powerful when there's, you know, 5 votes either way. You can, have they actually got anything? Are they
No.
fighting the way that they said they were going to bring the ruckus? Do you remember?
No.
What
Yes.
did they do?
They've done absolutely nothing. And that's not an exaggeration. They've done absolutely nothing other than tweet. They're good at strongly worded letters. And that's about it. They are, and I guess it depends on what your definition of effective is, because they've been very effective in maintaining the status quo and funneling people back into an electoral system that's designed to, you know, murder us all, basically. So yeah, they've been effective in that way. But in terms of have they been effective on the promises that they've made or in serving their constituency and the people of the country? Absolutely not. They've done nothing. You know, I think if anything proved that, it was the force the vote situation. They refused to even consider it. And then one of the excuses that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez gave was that we can't do force the vote because fighting for $15 an hour is, quote, more doable. And then when the fight for $15 an hour came around, not a whimper. There was not a whimper. They didn't make a peep. They've remained silent mostly on foreign policy. I don't think the AOC has mentioned once the illegal bombings of Syria. She has gone along with, you know, coup attempts in Venezuela. You know, every once in a while, one of them will pop their head up and say something that's, you know, outside the narrative. But I'm fully convinced that they're given their issue. This is the thing you're allowed to kind of, you know, go against the grain on. And it's always just enough where they still have the votes to get whatever they want. And by they, I mean the status quo, the establishment. So they're given their little thing that they can pop their head up and kind of like try to get their, you know, progressive street cred back. But when it all comes down to it, they're all working for the same team, and it's not the people.
But haven't you got to like look at the micro and then the macro? You know, haven't you got to do that? Because I distinctly heard words like micro and macro.
Yes.
And the conversation when the vote came to give Israel $1 million for rearming their Iron Dome. And then AOC, well, she didn't vote at all on it, did she? Because of the micro and the macro and the conversations. And
then she cried, and we were supposed to all feel bad for her because it was such a tough decision. It's not a tough decision. Either you stand with Palestinians or you don't. And it's really that simple. And if you stand with Palestinians, you don't neglect to vote against giving more money to Israel for the Iron Dome. That's a no-brainer. That shouldn't have even, and her vote didn't matter. It didn't matter. It was going to pass anyway. Israel owns our government. It doesn't matter what your vote is.
I grew up in the 80s. I know I'm not old, Misty.
Me too. I grew up in the 80s.
I grew up in an era where we had the whole South Africa thing and the Free Mandela movement. And I grew up thinking, and the whole world recognized that apartheid was bad and shouldn't ever happen. Yet here we are, and Human Rights Watch and BTLM have, you know, confirmed in the last 12 months or so. I mean, Human Rights Watch are a pile of crap anyway, but that they've confirmed that it's an apartheid state. And as I'm talking, I'm going to put cards on the screen to show people the difference between, you know, the rights that a Palestinian has in occupied Israel and the rights that an American has, who's just declared himself Jewish and has stolen a Palestinian's home for himself. It's incredible. And if you've got supposed progressive politicians being elected and going into Congress to bring the ruckus, and then they can't even vote against arming an Iron Dome in an apartheid state that is a crushing, occupying force, what use are you? Exactly. And I would really love for a journalist one day to ask one of the squad these questions. But of course, the only people that would ask the squad these questions are people like yourself, the people like Jesse, the people like, you know, Nico House and Jimmy Dore and the Convo Couch and these progressive and obviously the Grey Zone and these outlets and these journalists are cast to the edge of society and don't get to ask these questions. Don't you feel this is, you know, I hate to use the word, but it's like it echoes you use the words, but it echoes the 1930s, doesn't it? With the way, the people who are speaking out are cast to the edge of society. What do you think about that?
No, it's absolutely accurate. I mean, it's and what's really frustrating to me is that nobody is calling these politicians out for their unwillingness to answer any of these questions, or to even put themselves in the same vicinity of somebody who will ask them those questions. They don't, I mean, they're very careful about who they choose to do interviews with. They're very protected. I mean, even when they did the little sleepover party on the Capitol steps,
Yeah,
they were very protected.
There was no announcement beforehand, was there? It was all very secretive
No.
and all very rehearsed and
Yeah.
orchestrated.
And even while they were there, they weren't. I mean, if you would think AOC's got a massive social media following, she could have been blasting that out once an hour. Hey, get down here to the Capitol. Everybody get down here to the Capitol. We're going to raise a ruckus, right? They didn't do any of that. They tweeted about it a couple times, like for PR, and it was very clear it was for PR, but they didn't really promote it or anything, or try to really get any, it was definitely for show. It was very much for show. But yeah, they won't even put themselves. I mean, one of my favorite moments was when Max Blumenthal cornered AOC in the halls of Congress to ask her about Venezuela, and she looked like a deer in headlights and was like, we're working on a statement. You need to work on a statement to oppose a coup? Like, what is wrong with you? And it's the thing about Palestinians. That's because Palestine's very important to me. It's something that I've been paying attention to for a very long time. And she, when she was running for Congress, she was very vocal about supporting Palestinians and Palestinian rights. And the minute she got elected, it was like literally within 24 hours, that kind of stuff started disappearing off of her website. And it was very telling. I mean, it was very clear within, like a week of her getting elected that she was not going to be who she claimed she was. And, they're all the squad to varying degrees on different issues are all that way. Like I said, they have their one or two issues that they're allowed to poke their head out and be kind of controversial about. But for the most part, they go along with everything. They don't challenge the Democratic establishment at all. They constantly talk about how terrible Republicans are. And every once in a while, they'll throw some tepid criticism at and it's usually not at anybody in specific. It's the Democratic Party or whatever. But they don't challenge the Democratic Party at all.
But
and
that's what they weren't elected to challenge the Republicans. They were elected to challenge the Democrats. That's
exactly what I was just about to say. People forget that. I think people forget that when they ran in 2017, 2018, they were coming out of the Bernie Sanders movement that had just been royally screwed over. And the whole point was, we're going to go and we're going to transform the Democratic Party. We're going to challenge the Democratic Party establishment, and we're going to transform it back into a party of the people. And they haven't done that, not in any way, not at all. It's really frustrating because people are still making excuses and justifications for that.
And meanwhile, nobody's getting healthcare. I want to come to the healthcare thing in a bit, if you don't mind. But you touched on 2016 there, and AOC and the squad, some of the members of the squad being elected out of the sort of movement that was behind Bernie Sanders. Now, I know that you followed Russiagate quite extensively, as I did, and we're finding out over the last few weeks that a couple of the main sources of the Steele dossier were indicted for lying to the FBI. Now, these sources were sources that were paid by the Hillary Clinton campaign, and obviously the Steele dossier that they were informing, that they gave their information that filled the Steele dossier, obviously that was being funded by Fusion GPS, that was being funded by the Hillary Clinton campaign. So they made this whole Russiagate story out of thin air. And the more you look into it, the more nefarious it was. We knew this at the time, you and I, Misty. We knew what was going on. I was quite loud about it, as were many other people. Alan Marte at the Grey Zone has done brilliant work, as did many other people. But nobody would listen to us. And now it's coming out that now everything that we were saying at the time, yeah, it's true. They've been indicted. This was a massive propaganda stunt to cover up for the fact that Hillary Clinton lost to Donald Trump. Possibly she was the only person in the world that could have lost to him at that stage. And she lost to him not because of anything that Russia did, but because the Democratic Party were proven to be all liars. that had just rigged their own primary against the socialist candidate. And this is something that they try and do in other countries. They've just done it in Nicaragua, or just tried to do it in Nicaragua. They tried to do it in Cuba and elsewhere as well. By, the CIA have done this in countries all throughout history, really. I can go back to as far back to 53 in the stories that the CIA spread about Mohammed Mossadegh, who was Times Man of the Year before. They spread the rumors, I think, that he was something like a Jewish communist, and that's that it's all with false information. This is one of the first things in a war against a country that you do. You control the airwaves and fill it with bullshit. And it just seems to me like they did it not just in other countries, but their own country country as well. And they fooled ridiculous. The FBI and I don't know what the FBI have been up to. I really don't. I look at what they do with this whole Russiagate thing, and I think it's a farce. But then this is a group of people that were conned by Sigga the hacker into thinking that he was charged by Julian Assange to hack into the Icelandic bloody somebody who. It is pathetic, really. Do you think there's going to be anything come of this Durham inquiry or whatever it is that's just indicted these people? And is this ever going to stop, or are we just going to get this forever and just oodles of bullshit and people like you and me talking truth, but on the periphery, on the outskirts, and silenced? And it's getting really worried now when they're talking about bringing in this authoritarian sort of passports, etc. This is going to be much easier for them to do, isn't it?
Yes. No, and that's what I've been, myself and others have been screaming about for years. The whole censorship and propaganda aspect of it, to me, is the front line of everything, because you're right. If you control the narrative, you control everything. And they're, again, very good at that in this country. And what's really, is there going to be accountability for the lies of Russiagate? There might be a couple low-level fall guys. That's what they do. They pick a couple low-level guys to, you'll get like 5 years in prison or whatever. And that'll be the end of it. There's never going to be any legitimate accountability. Hillary Clinton's never going to see the inside of a courtroom. And it's really depressing. Rachel Maddow's still pretending like it's a legitimate story. If I were her, I would be embarrassed. I would resign in shame. You've been screaming about it for 5 years. You've just been proven to be completely full of crap, which I knew. She's a Rhodes Scholar. She knew what she was doing was pure propaganda. She's not an idiot. If I could see it clearly, I think somebody like Rachel Maddow could see it. So yeah, I don't. And what is really funny is you mentioned Hillary Clinton lost to Donald Trump, and WikiLeaks revealed that was her hand-picked opponent. Yeah. She hand-picked her own opponent and then lost.
Piper candidate, wasn't it?
Yeah. Yes, he was the Pied Piper candidate, and she got her minions in the media to boost him up as a legitimate candidate and get to give him billions of dollars in free media coverage. Billions of dollars, free media coverage. I mean, that is the reason why people want to blame Julian Assange or Jill Stein or Susan Sarandon for Donald Trump. You need to blame Hillary Clinton. That's who chose him as her handpicked opponent. That's who and you need to blame the media, because the media gave him an unbelievable amount of free airtime. Yeah. And then they all afterwards acted so shocked and appalled by his behavior. And you're the ones that gave him the position. The CEO of CBS said he might not be good for America, but he's good for CBS. Joe, what's his name? Scarborough and what's her face? Mika Brzezinski were caught on a hot mic, promising to give him softball questions. And then the next year when he's president, they're acting horrified that Donald Trump is president. Are you joking? It's a joke. They don't. And it's, this is what it is. But I don't think there's ever going to be any legitimate accountability for Russiagate. Unfortunately, there's never accountability for power. If anything, we might see a couple low-level people go down because that'll be how they keep people pacified and oh, look, they did hold people accountable. But it's never going to be the people who should genuinely be held accountable. And they want to talk about Russia interfering with our election. Hello, Hillary Clinton hired a foreign spy to get information from another country on a presidential candidate, and then it's all lied. She paid for all this stuff, and then it's all lies, and they push it out in the media. That's election interference.
Yeah, they didn't just pay a foreign person to do that. They paid a foreign person to do that, and then got lawyers, her own lawyers, to be the sources for that dossier. Now, if that's not creating a complete and utter fallacy, I don't know what is. But then this is, this is what they do, isn't it?
I know. Her lawyer went to the FBI and planted a story and then billed her for that visit to the FBI to plant the story. But she's never going to be held accountable for that. In fact, I think she was just on Rachel Maddow yesterday or something, talking about how January 6th was so terrible and blah, blah, blah. And, people are still treating her like she has any legitimate say at all. And, she is every bit as guilty of election interference as anybody ever. You know what I mean? Like, she rigged a primary against Bernie Sanders. She hired this foreign spy and got her lawyers to plan all these phony stories and got her minions in the media to push these ridiculous ideas. And nothing will ever happen to her.
It's so sad. It really is. It's
It
so
is.
sad. I caught a bit of Maddow the other day interviewing Peter Strzok, who was somebody he lost his job at the FBI because he lied, and he was sending text messages saying he's going to take Trump down and etc. She had him on, and it was kind of hilarious listening to them try and skip around these people who had been indicted by the FBI for lying in the Steele dossier, because she kept saying that they were paid by somebody, but this is a lady who there are videos of like an hour-long segment of her going Trump, 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 Russia, 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 Trump, 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 Russia, Russia, Trump, and she would say it a million times, but you can't get her to say Clinton. The Clinton campaign paid for the dossier. She can't say the Clinton campaign or the Clinton's lawyers paid Fusion GPS to fund the dossier. She won't say any of that. But when the roles were reversed and she thought it was the Trump, it was Trumpety, Trumpety, Trump, 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 and she was saying more times in an hour than the Nelly the Elephant line. And this was the #1 show in America. Wasn't #1 news show.
Yeah, and that's what her audience wants to hear, though. I mean, as Steve Poikonen says, they peddle in confirmation bias. Like you just tell your audience whatever they want to hear. I mean, she had a defamation lawsuit where the lawyer or the judge ruled that she's not legitimate news.
Yes.
And but the problem is that she's sold as legitimate news. She's pushed as a legitimate news source. People see her, like the average American citizen sees Rachel Maddow and MSNBC as a legitimate news source, and they're not. They're paid propaganda. They are the propaganda wing. MSNBC is the propaganda wing of the Democratic Party. Period. End of story. There's no question. I mean, and not only that, they're completely corporate captured. When segments are being sponsored by Boeing and Pfizer, there's a problem.
Well, look at the name. Do you know what MSNBC means? Microsoft NBC.
Oh, I did not know that.
Microsoft. It's Microsoft that launched it. It's Bill Gates.
Of course.
The Bill Gates.
Of course it is.
Who's in charge of the vaccinating the world and the we've given the Microsoft guy free rein to sort out the globe's health.
And now apparently we've given him the ability to push all of our news. And he also owns, I think, about 50% of all farmland in the country. So I'm sure there's nothing wrong with that.
What could go wrong, Misty?
Right. What totally fine. Everything's going to be great. He's such a nice guy, that Bill Gates.
But I know you spoke to Piers yesterday, Piers Robinson. Somebody called him Piers Morgan on me.
Jesse did. Poor Piers, and he's like, I've dealt with that ever since my university days.
I couldn't stop laughing. I really couldn't. And he's very worried at the moment. Piers is about the authoritarian move that governments, your government, my movement, governments around the world are moving. We haven't mandated vaccines yet in this country, yet being the operative word, but I know in other countries like Austria they're doing it, and they're on this is the way the world is going. What's it like over there, and is there any pushback on it? Are people fed up? Are they not going to comply? What's going to go on?
There's some pushback. It's not, the protests that we've seen across Europe have been incredible. I mean, it's so, it gives me a little bit of hope that there's so many people pushing back against this whole thing. But in the US, it's not as big yet. And I think it's just because it hasn't been as strict I think generally speaking, this kind of stuff starts, in places like Australia or in Europe, and then it kind of moves to the United States. So they're kind of softening us up for it, I think. They haven't really mandated anything yet. They've been trying, a couple things have been struck down by courts. They've definitely been trying though, and there's definitely the attempt at manufacturing consent for it for sure. And now they're talking about kids. And I think I think honestly, they've been overplaying their hand on a couple different things. I think firing people for refusing to get vaccinated has radicalized a bunch of people. And I think coming for kids is really starting to radicalize a bunch of people. So I'm hopeful that there will be a growing amount of pushback moving forward. Right now, I think it's too quiet for my taste. But I think honestly, we're at a point right now where if you speak out against it, you're smeared, you're slandered, you're called an anti-vaxxer, you're called anti-science, you're called a right-wing extremist and a Trumper and all of these things. And I think for a lot of people, that's really difficult. That's not for everybody to be slandered in public like that on a regular basis. Some of us are used to it. But I think as more of us speak out against it, and as more of these conversations are had, like the panel that we did on Facts on the Ground, I think that it's going to start making people more comfortable, in coming forward and speaking out against, and you don't even have, it's not even about being anti-vaccine. I think that's a big thing.
And I wanted to touch on that because I took the vaccine pretty early on. As soon as it was available to me, I had the vaccine. And the reason I did it was simple, Misty, is because when the COVID pandemic certainly first became evident that it was over here, it was sort of March, April in 2020. And then the lockdowns came into force. One of the first things I did was start looking after myself. I changed my diet radically. I stopped eating takeaways. I started cooking. And my diet's much more healthy now. There's way less salt. I'd already quit smoking. I started a massive exercise regime to the point where I exercise 4 or 5 days a week now. And I did that literally because, I knew that if I was going to catch COVID, I was going to have my immune system at the height that it could. But we didn't see a massive push like that over here in our media. We didn't see a massive push to get people healthy. What we got a massive push of was just stay in your homes. It's very scary. Stay in your homes, comply. And if you don't comply, we're going to get the police, the COVID cops are going to come down on you. So they shut everything down. And, I took the vaccine simply because there were countries around the world that hated each other, and they all rang the alarm bell at the same time. So China, Cuba, Russia, America, us, we were all like, shit, we're in trouble here with the vaccine. So I knew it was serious with the COVID side. So I knew it was serious, and that's why I took it seriously. And one of the things that I made a point of saying early on was, people who don't want to take the vaccine, don't alienate them, don't chastise them, because these are people that know that our governments have been lying to us for 5 years about things like Russiagate, about things like the Steele dossier, about Syria, about Venezuela, about blah, 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 blah. You can't blame people for being averse and think their government is lying to me, when your jumping off point should be the government is lying to me. You can't chastise them. And people have got very upset with me, some people have said, oh, you should apologize for calling people COVID idiots. It's not, I didn't call anybody a COVID idiot. It's not to my recollection. And if I did, I'm extremely sorry. I went to pains not to, call people who didn't want to have a vaccination, far right or anything like that. It's ridiculous. But now we've got 18 months of data. And now it seems to me ridiculous to be giving people boosters, etc., when the two vaccinations don't work. Why would you need a booster if you've been vaccinated twice? I got a really bad reaction to that second vaccine. I was off my feet for 2 or 3 days. I did a video explaining it. It was I was ill. I don't want to go through that again. And plus, I've really looked after my health since. And then I started seeing studies that actually, if you catch COVID, you've got better immunity against COVID than you would if you got a booster in the vaccine. And now I'm like, Well, now it's not about health, is it? And if you couple this thinking with the fact that right now, right today, yesterday, and next week, our governments are voting for this new care bill that is pretty much going to turn our health service into the American health service. It's going to chop it up into 42 individual services, and then it's going to stick somebody from American health insurance on the board of those things. So it's going to profitize. It's going to turn our NHS into a for-profit system. Misty, you live in America. Oh. What's your health service like?
It's garbage. You guys need to fight that with everything you have. With everything you have. Like I mean, I wish I could be there with you to fight, because the fact that I knew from jump that it was not about health. It was very clear, because if it was about health, the minute that this pandemic hit, they would have given us healthcare in this country. No brainer, right? No brainer. I mean, how many people, I think that they've said that like a third of all COVID deaths would have been prevented with if people had access to healthcare. So it's clearly never been about health, ever. It's always been about control. It's always been about, it's a money grab too. I mean, they're using this the CARES Act in this country was a massive upward transfer of wealth to the top 1%. The Build Back Better thing is another one that's going to be a huge transfer of wealth, but this has never been about health. It has never been about keeping people healthy or giving, like you said, they never, in this, nobody talked about, hey, you should be taking vitamin D, you should be taking zinc, you should be eating healthy, you should be getting exercise, you should be, nobody said any of those things. You're right. It was just fear mongering. Stay home. It's scary. It's dangerous. Like, oh my gosh, you have to be afraid of your neighbors. And you have to wear this mask and all of these things. And, and not only have they been lying to us, like you said, about things like Russiagate and Syria and all of that, they've been caught lying about COVID repeatedly. And then they wonder why nobody trusts them. And bullying people is surely not going to make them trust you anymore. That's ridiculous. Has bullying ever like changed anybody's mind? No, absolutely not. If you want to convince me, I'm not vaccinated and I'm not going to get vaccinated until I feel comfortable doing so. And that shouldn't be a controversial thing, period. I have underlying health things. I have heart issues. This is a problem that, the vaccine could make worse. So yeah, you're not going to get me. If you want me to get vaccinated, you need to prove to me that it's safe and effective, and that I'm not going to have to get 492 booster shots. I'm not interested in that. Especially and I'm not saying that the virus isn't serious and that it hasn't been deadly for people, but it generally speaking has a very high recovery rate. I mean, I'm not an at-risk person. I'm not older. I don't have, yes, I have underlying health conditions, but it's, which is worse, the vaccine or getting COVID? And to me, it seems like the vaccine is probably going to be worse at this point. So yeah, I'm not interested in all of the bullying measures and all of the calling me a right winger. That doesn't work on me. And I hope it doesn't work on other people. It's unfortunate that a lot of people feel like they're being forced into it because of their jobs. I think that's disgusting. Forcing a medical procedure on somebody, coercing them into getting a medical, this isn't just like, hey, you have to drink some water. This is, you have to get an injection into your body. Nobody should be forced to do that against their will.
I understand, vaccinations and the way vaccinations work. And I understand that, for instance, the smallpox vaccination, it didn't vaccinate you against getting smallpox. What it did was it drastically reduced the effects of smallpox on you. There's a photo of two people who have smallpox side by side. One was injected and one wasn't. You could see the difference. And I totally understand with the vaccine that we need, when they say we need a lot of people to get vaccinated, because then there's less chance of it mutating in the undrugged, as somebody called the other day, the undrugged, like that, rather than unvaccinated people. But there's less chance of it mutating. And obviously we know that the mutations from this virus, this is a very mutatable virus, thanks to, it looks like the NIH and Wuhan lab, etc., although we'll stick a pin in that for the moment. But you see what I mean? There are lots of questions here that I have about it, and they are pertinent questions. And when the only time I've heard anybody being asked these sort of questions was when the guy from CNN, the doctor from CNN, asked Fauci on CNN, how can you explain to people why they must get a vaccine when if they get COVID, they've got a better immunity against it. And his answer was, I don't have an explanation, or I don't have an answer for that. Well, if you don't have an answer for it, then what you've been doing is peddling bullshit. And we know that he's been peddling bullshit quite a lot, don't we?
Yes.
He's lied before, hasn't he, Misty?
Oh, lots of times. He's lied about masks, and he's a disgusting human being. I mean, the AIDS thing is a whole other level. And then the torturing of dogs this guy is not a good person. And so this is who you're boosting up as like this medical authority that we're all supposed to trust and follow.
This is who you're voting as the sexiest man or something like that.
Oh, that's so gross. That's so gross. The way that we celebritize these people and that we, hold them up as these moral authorities when they're seriously the most disgusting people on planet Earth. These are psychopaths. And the fact that they're elevated to positions of power is a real problem. And Fauci is a terrible person. He shouldn't be anywhere near a position of power. I certainly don't trust a single word that comes out of his mouth. I don't care what he says. It makes no difference to me whatsoever. And again, I am not anti-vax. It makes me laugh when people say that. For years, my oldest daughter is 13. When she was about 2.5, she was diagnosed with autism. And as you know, people will often, all the time, oh, well, it's the vaccines, and vaccines don't cause autism. But I was in that fight for a very long time because that was thrown in my face. And so I was kind of forced into researching it and like trying to figure out what was going on behind that. So I literally spent years on the front lines of trying to combat the misinformation and trying to combat the way that people will use my daughter's existence as a way to, convince people to not get vaccinated. I'm not anti-vax. I think vaccines can be great. I think that they can do a lot of good things. I think they should be continually researched and attempted to make better and more effective and safer. And I think that we should always be able to question them and question the science behind them, the funding behind them. I think all of those things, but I am not anti-vax by any stretch of anybody's imagination. To me, this is not, it's cultish when you have to trust the science. Hello, science is constantly trying to prove itself wrong. That is science. Science is questioning everything. Like it is a continual process of debunking yourself. That is the whole point of science. You come up with an idea, and then you try to disprove it and try to figure, you know what I mean? And there is no trusting the science. I love when people say the science is settled. Science is never settled, ever.
No,
ever.
What's interesting to me is when somebody comes up with, when somebody has a question like I just presented, the whole getting COVID and your defense against it is better than having. I think Bill Maher had somebody on his show, and Bill Maher said this to the guy, and the response from his guest was, "You're crazy." That was his response. He immediately didn't refute it with any facts. There was nothing, well, there's this study, there's that. It was just, you're crazy. Bill Maher has come up with something for once that actually has some meaning, and for once is like, it's a sane thing to ask. Well, why, if this, then do I need this? And the answer that his guest gave was, you're crazy. And this happens a lot, doesn't it, Misty? You don't get any pushback. I'm very happy to have a conversation with people about this. I'm very happy, and I will very happily talk forever about it, and try and come up with some consensus as to what is correct here. But it's clear that the people who are deciding what's best for us are not necessarily, you couldn't say they'd done this on purpose, although if you wanted to, then well done, you've done it perfectly, but they're certainly jumping on it and using it as a way to bring in a new era of authoritarianism, the same way in which Piers Robinson said to me the other day that we ushered in the area of the Patriot Act after 9/11, It's and they're doing it again here, and they're jumping on this COVID thing to bring in these passes and these unlimited vaccinations and whatever. And the Orwellian doesn't even cover it anymore.
No, it's well past that. And you're right. And I'm willing to have the conversation of whether or not it was an intentional thing or whatever, because I think those are questions we should also be allowed to ask. And I think that that's something that we should, because I don't put anything past these people. But for sure, they never let a good crisis go to waste.
And
ever.
likewise, Misty, likewise, I'm willing to have a conversation whether, digital currencies and passes and what have you, whether these are something that we could utilize in the future. I'm willing to have that discussion. I'm not going to say outright, oh, no, you can't do that. We'd be like China. It's like, I've never been to China. It might be working very perfectly over there. You just don't know. But what's clear is the system that we've got now is not only unfit for purpose, it's literally driving us into extinction,
Yes.
So we clearly need to change course radically. And it's like, is this the course direction we want to change? Because it seems like, they've already made these decisions without consulting people, the people that it's going to affect.
Well, they know
anyway.
best. They know best. They don't. That's the thing. They don't think that we have any ability to think for ourselves, that we aren't capable of thinking for ourselves, making choices for ourselves. That's, once you reach a level of power, it corrupts your brain and you start to think that you know better and that you're a more qualified authority. That's why authoritarianism, I've had authoritarians come at me on Twitter, and you don't to me, no, thank you. I'm not signing up for that at all. I don't need somebody to make my decisions for me. I'm quite capable of doing that for myself. And that whole theory is not something I'm ever going to subscribe to. It's not something I'm ever going to sign on to. I'll fight it tooth and nail. The people who are in positions of power now have proven that, I don't want anything to do with somebody making decisions for me. I don't know if it could be made more clear at this point that they don't have our best interests at heart. Like I said, in this country, we've been shoveling money to the rich people. Not even shoveling, bulldozing money as, children are starving. Kids are starving every single day in this country, in the United States of America. It's, again, the year 2021 in the United States of America, in the middle of a global pandemic, and we still do not have healthcare. This is not a sustainable system. It's just not. It's going to break. To me, the United States empire is falling. It's failing. I think we're well past the point of no return. The only question is now is how bad is it going to get? To me, I'm very hopeful. It's hard for me to be hopeful, but I'm trying to remain hopeful that the people will band together and see through the divisiveness and see through their attempts to pit us against each other. Because listen, I'm not saying we don't have differences. I'm not saying we don't have problems. I'm not saying that there aren't conversations that need to be had, and those are going to be difficult conversations. But we can't do any of that stuff until we deal with the system that's killing all of us. We have to tackle that first. We have a common enemy. We need to deal with that first. And then we can have those tough conversations.
We also need, if we're going to have these tough conversations, we're going to need transparency. We're going to need honesty. And we're going to need to know that we are looking at the facts and the truth.
Yes.
And in my opinion, that is never going to happen until the gentleman over your left shoulder is free.
Yeah.
I can't explain to people how important Julian Assange and his freedom is to, I would like to say democracy, but we don't really have democracy anymore. We certainly haven't had it for 5 years over here, and neither have you over there. You just haven't. You haven't had it. What you're going to get is neoliberalism, no matter who you vote for in both countries. What you and I want, it doesn't matter. And if somebody from the Democrats if Bernie Sanders looked like he was going to win again, the Democrats would cut his legs from underneath him. And that's exactly what happened over here with Jeremy Corbyn. And, what we need is truth, and we need facts, and we need honesty, and we need somebody who we know that we can look to get these things. And that's why he's in jail, in my opinion now, Misty. It's not necessarily anything that he's done in 2010 or the Afghan war logs or the Iraq, war logs, or, that's what he was that's what the sealed indictment is for. But then, there's this other stuff that he did with the 2016 election. And, that's why we know Hillary Clinton rigged the primary, they rigged the primary for Hillary Clinton. But it's all the stuff that he could be exposing right now, and he's a threat to them. We know we're being lied to. And this is why I say you can't point fingers that don't want to take the vaccination and say you're an anti-vaxxer and you're insane and you're a conspiracy theorist, because you know what? I can guarantee you, Misty, that you and I will both believe at least one story that we've heard in the last 5 years that is false. I can guarantee you that. I can guarantee you that every single one of us has been told that. And the only way we are going to stop that is if Julian Assange is free. Now, we're awaiting this decision, I suppose, from the Royal Courts of Justice here, and that could happen anytime between now and whenever, you know.
Yeah.
How important is, have I encapsulated that right? Is he if he's not free, democracy's done for, it's gone.
Yes. Well, and it's so much worse than even just democracy's done. You know, and I get called a cultist and I get, you know, all kinds of stuff because I talk about this so often, but to me, it is the front line. This is the front line. If Julian Assange is, if he's allowed to be extradited and he's brought to the United States, that ends press freedom forever, really. Once you lose these rights, it is incredibly difficult to get them back, as the Patriot Act has shown us. That was supposed to be temporary. We're now, what, 20 years later, and we still don't have those rights back. So, I mean, I struggle all the time with trying to figure out the right words to use to impress upon people how serious this issue is, because this is, to me, it's a turning point in human history. We're going to go one of two ways, and it's not looking good. It's not looking good. The fact that he's been in prison for 2.5 years, and before that was an illegal and arbitrary detention for 7 years, is a travesty of justice. They have no case. Any semblance of a case that they did have has completely imploded over the past 6 to 8 months. And you know, his human rights have been violated numerous times throughout the course of these past 10 years. He's been spied on. There were plots to murder him. His baby's diaper was stolen. I mean, all of these things, if they're going to do it to him, they'll do it to all of us. And he is, you know, people try to say that, you know, we're trying to, that it's the cult of Assange, or that we're turning him into a hero. And that's not really true. Julian Assange is a human being. He's fallible, but WikiLeaks as an organization has never gotten it wrong. There is not a single other news organization out there with a 100% record of accuracy. To me, that's invaluable. That's something that we need in this world, because you're right. We cannot move forward if we don't have transparency. I think there's Julian, I'm going to butcher the quote, but Julian Assange once said that, you know, like I mentioned before, we have all of these differences. We can't even have those conversations about ideologies and all of these differences because we don't have the truth. We don't even know where we are. How are we supposed to decide where we're going? And so, you know, the fact that we even have to fight this fight, the fact that we have to, you know, try to get him out of prison and argue this case when there is no case, is really scary to me. It's really terrifying. And we've seen the attacks on journalism that have been increasing. Really, I mean, the attacks on the First Amendment have been ongoing since the First Amendment was developed. Powerful people don't want their secrets exposed. Yeah. But over the past 10 or 15 years, it has ramped up exponentially. Barack Obama went after more journalists and whistleblowers than all other presidents combined. It's only gotten worse since then. And we now see journalists getting brutalized at protests and getting arrested and photographed and all of this stuff. And this isn't just in the United States. The attack on journalism and the attack on truth and information is global. And, you know, I say it all the time. What's happening in the Julian Assange case is the United States is seeking global jurisdiction over information and journalism. And these are known liars. These are known propagandists. How many times does your government get to lie to you before your sense of skepticism kicks in? We're just going to keep, you know, losing our ability to challenge power because we're not even going to have the information to be able to do that. And so, I mean, I realize that I get overly passionate about it because I've invested so much time and energy into this. But it really is that important. It really is. It's very frustrating that I can't find the words to get people, because people who should know better still won't speak out for Julian Assange, or worse, they speak against him. And that's been really depressing to watch over the past several years.
It's the the reason I smiled then when you mentioned the global, because I wrote down global effect ? Because there's two things that are happening simultaneously while he's still incarcerated without charge in this country. He's committed no crime in this country. His bail jumping charge was because of the whole Sweden thing, and we know that that was dropped the minute that he was in. We know that that was a ruse to get him in custody. Just like he said, proving him right once again. He said, as soon as they get me into custody, this indictment, this sealed indictment, is going to be exposed by America, and that is exactly what happened. Just proving the whole Sweden thing was a whole witch hunt. But there's two effects that this has, that really stand out to me globally. First of all, is the reason he's in prison is because this is a message to other journalists. This is a message. You do not tell the truth about our crimes. How many journalists, how many agencies around the world, and every agency in the world now has basically got what WikiLeaks have got, and a Dropbox that you can drop information to. How many agencies have had leaks like Julian has had and WikiLeaks, and been so scared, so petrified that they didn't publish them because they were afraid that what was going to happen? How many? I suggest it's thousands. And the second thing that really jumps out to me is this is a message to dictators around the world to say, you can get away with doing whatever you want to your journalists, because look at what we're doing to ours. United Nations specialists on torture are saying this guy has been psychologically tortured for a decade, and it's no-touch torture. It's the worst kind of torture. It will send him insane, and dictators around the world are looking at what we're doing, and it's like, well, where is your moral authority to say, I can't hijack a plane in midair and bring him down and then go and torture that journalist, when you're doing it to the greatest journalist that's ever lived, if you actually look at the stories that he's uncovered?
It's not even close. Yeah, that I think people, when I say that he's the greatest journalist that ever lived, I'll get eye rolls. It's not even close. The number of stories, the amount of corruption and the war crimes, and the fact that he has a 100% record of accuracy, it's not even close. There's not even, nobody else is even in the same arena.
It's over on average. It's over 1 million documents in the 15 years, 16 years,
and never had to retract a single word. And here's what's really more important than that is that what Julian Assange and WikiLeaks offers, it's not conjecture. It's not like some talking head giving his opinion. This is source documentation, straight up evidence. This is not, his opinion or some long-winded article, like trying to pick apart a story. It's source documentation. That's invaluable. Yeah, it's invaluable. And you're right. Other countries, we saw it recently with the president of Azerbaijan going after the BBC reporter and being like, she was trying, oh, you're so mean to journalists. Oh yeah, well, where's Julian Assange? Yeah. And that's exactly is what is going to happen. People like the president of Azerbaijan, other countries who have a horrible record with their treatment of journalists are going to be emboldened by this. And we have no moral standing to be able to say to them, we try to pretend like we do. Every World Press Freedom Day, Joe Biden will put out a tweet, and Kamala Harris, Mike Pompeo will even put out a tweet about how journalism is the foundation of democracy and we must protect our journalists. You're torturing Julian Assange. You know what I mean? Like it's the hypocrisy is thick. But we have no moral standing. We have no moral authority. We are the moral superior of no one. In fact, we're the worst offenders. And again, we're headed down a really dangerous path with this. The fact that now we have like 5 or 6 companies that control 90% of our media. And that was years ago. It's probably worse than that now. Yeah. The censorship that we're seeing across social media, they are desperately trying to grasp full control over the narrative. And we are already, in my opinion, the United States is already the single most propagandized country on earth. And that is only getting worse as we continue forward. And if we keep giving them this power and we keep allowing them to silence journalists, and it's not even just the fact that this will silence journalists, this will silence whistleblowers. This will put off whistleblowers from bringing forth information that is the stuff that we deserve to know, that we need to know. If war crimes are being committed in our names, we should know those things. We should be able to hold those people accountable. The trouble is that none of those people are ever held accountable. The only people that we ever punish are the truth tellers. And that's a real problem in our societies. We need to figure out how to fix that.
We do. And I think that's a good way to end it, Misty. I've had a great hour with you. You're awesome. Is there anything that we've missed that you'd like to talk about, anything you'd
No,
like to say?
this was fun though. Thank you for having me. I'm glad
It
that
was
you're
really depressing, probably, but you know,
no,
I had a
I'm
great
used
time.
to it.
I always have
I'm
a
used
great
to
time talking to you, but I mean, it was
it's fun.
depressing as hell. I'm sorry, everybody.
It's depressing, but it is good to talk to somebody that I know understands it. It's, you know, because sometimes it's frustrating to have to deal with people who don't get it, or who will trash me for, you know, my passion or my opinions. And I know that like you get it. So yeah, I mean, as depressing as it is, I'm kind of used to it. We joke about it at Action for Assange all the time that, you know, we have to have a lot of gallows humor because we on a weekly basis have to talk about the torture of journalists and war crimes and, you know, all that fun special administrative measures and all that fun stuff. So we have to, it's good to talk to people and be able to have a laugh about some of these things too, because it is so ridiculous that sometimes you have to laugh or you'll lose your mind. So yeah, I appreciate you having me on. It's always great to talk to you. And yeah, I'm sorry for being so depressing, everybody.
No, not at all. You weren't depressing. You were great. It was just a subject matter.
Yeah.
At Sarcasm Stardust on Twitter.
Yes.
Facts on the ground, and Bitch, is it on YouTube?
Yeah, Bitch is every
Rockfin?
Wednesday at 7 Eastern in the States, or you can just catch it. It's Bitch with Comrade Misty. It's basically just like my weekly 2-hour therapy session. And tomorrow, or no, wait, today's Wednesday. Tonight we're doing Bitch Giving for Thanksgiving.
Weekly 2-hour therapy session.
It is like, it really is. It's, you know, I just have people on and it's kind of Joe Rogan style. There's no subject matter. We just talk, and whatever we're mad about, we bitch about it and we get it off our chests, and it's fun. And yeah, we're doing Bitch Giving tonight. So I have no idea who's coming or when they're coming. People are just going to pop in and out as we go through the 2 hours. So it should be a lot of fun.
That's awesome. Enjoy that. Misty Winston, thanks very much. And I'll talk to you soon.
Yes. Thank you.